Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Kitchen time. I'm going to have a go at potting up one of the Cattleyas in the Cattleya series, so that will go in the playlist accordingly. But before I set the tripod up, because obviously for most of the work I need two hands, I just thought I'd go over that. Now that is worrying. These blooms are going, but it's the way in which they're going. The only time I've ever seen markings like that, luckily not in my collection but on somebody else's, was thrips. And thrips have many life stages, and one of the life stages is actually little burrowing worm type creatures that get inside the buds and leave scars all over the tissues. And when the buds open, they look a bit like that, which is a trifle worrying. Now if we turn the plant round, if it will stand upright and not fall over. On the latest blooms to open, they look okay on the surface, but when you look a little bit deeper, there could be some of the some similar marks. Now this could be old pests, not new pests. Obviously Cattleya buds take a while to develop, and I saw no signs of pests when we got this out of the pot and had a look, and what's in my pot bit. I saw no sign of pests anywhere, I must admit, but thrips can come and go. If you get them bad, they are a hell of a job to get rid of. Nearly swore then. They are hard. They're hard work because they have so many life stages, and they breed fast. The flying insects are relatively easy to kill, but some of the other life stages make their homes in the media. They like quite compact media to be able to survive well. So in an open bark mix with lots and lots of air and nothing breaking down, nothing fibrous, they have trouble surviving because they've got nothing to sort of get into. So they can phase themselves out basically by not being able to survive those life stages, if you see what I mean. But if they can get to the adult stage and the adults can lay eggs, you know, they can get into your buds and all that sort of thing. They'll get into new growths, they'll get into anything. So this is possibly an old outbreak. Could even be before it was imported, and it might not be thrips, it might be some foreign thing, undetermined. But whatever it is, we'll see what we can do. So the bit that will be off camera before I set the camera up is I'm going to get this under the tap. Let me just get it out of here. It's going to fall over if I take it out of here, but so be it. And when we looked at it, we did sort of say it's got some grow stones of some sort and quite a lot of bark and a couple of weeds. And there's some remnants of an old plug. Now that fibrous stuff could harbour the thrip larva stages. So first job is to tease out as much of this bark as I can. I'm not going to bore you with that, anybody can do that, that's pretty straightforward. And I need two hands. I'll show a bit of it once I get the tripod set up and getting the stakes off, and you know, it's a Cattleya. I will do my best to get all the sheaths off where things can lurk. So we'll clean the plant up as best as I can dry. So yeah, and I have let it dry out thoroughly before I attempt this process. There are some good roots on this plant. I'm taking a bit of a risk repotting it now on the grounds that I don't have a new root system growing. But it's a vigorous plant, and I think those new roots are going to come quite soon when the new growth start, and the new growth's highly likely to start below that growth because that bloom spike's coming off. That'll give the plant less to support. We'll leave these, you know, they've only just opened, but let me get the tripod set up and we'll make a start. Okay, stage one, get the stakes off. that way we find out what work they were doing and were they really necessary. They were held on with some sort of tape. I shall keep these stakes. I may even reuse them, but although they're wood, they seem to be coated with something that makes them last a hell of a lot longer, so we'll look after those. Next job, sheaths off, or as best as possible. These are bug hidey holes on Cattleyas. Favourite hiding place for scale, not that this plant's got any, but I have got some scale around in the grow room, and if they're around they can move. If they're happy where they are, they won't. But yeah, they do move from plant to plant. The crawler stage can be quite mobile. In the main they tend to stick to the plant they're on, and if you've got reasonable gaps between your plants, the chances are they'll stay put. So if you bring them in on a new plant, the chances are that's where they'll stay, but not always. They will move. The adults don't. Obviously that's like a little limpet shell on your normally on your leaves, pseudobulbs, base of the pseudobulbs, around the base of the plant mainly, but they'll get up on the underside of your leaves as well, and on the top side if there's enough of them, and then that's where they hatch out the new ones which break out of that shell. The parent dies and the new crawler stage are born, and away they go, and they'll move until they find somewhere that they think they're going to be happy in, and then they'll stick. So that's the time when they're liable to transfer across plants. There isn't much else gets underneath these sheaths, because they're so tight against the pseudobulbs, sometimes they won't even come off. They can be quite difficult. But if you've got relatively long nails like me, go steady when you do this, because if you keep digging your nails into the pseudobulbs, you'll leave marks and scars and possible places for infection. So go steady taking the sheaths off. Do it gently. But I've always found it not only takes away a lot of hiding places. I mean, mealybugs can get inside loose sheaths and you can't see them. That's the problem when you get inside the sheaths. They're not visible unless you take the sheaths off and find them. But it's better if the sheaths aren't there in the first place, then they can't hide. You're far liable to see them quicker that way. But so this sheath is going to be almost impossible to get off. Maybe I'll get it to peel, but it's so old, it's like flaky, and it's absolutely stuck rigid, so I'm not going to go mad with that one. This sheath here is on a new growth. It hasn't even extended up the cane yet. Well, in actual fact the sheath is up there, but this bit's still green, so this is the latest growth on here. I can get the parts that have dried off, but the other bit's probably going to stay there until it gets dry, at which point I can get it off. Right, that's the worst of that done. You can see what's what. Also, when your sheaths are off, you can see where the eyes are. You know, where the next growths are going to be. Many. Well, as I said when we first looked at this, it's got now that's what I was hoping to see. This growth that I'm about to take the spike off has two eyes, and it would be great if both of them push. Not necessarily, but possibly. You can tell it's dry at the moment. The weeds are dying because they haven't had any water. This are good. Right, so I'm going to tease out as much dry stuff as I can, and mainly from the centre, because that's where the old plug is, or was. Most of it we got out last time, just fiddling around. But I'm just wiggling my finger to see what's loose. Most of what doesn't come off now will come off under the tap, which I don't film. You don't want to see me blocking my sink up, do you? Well, you're not going to, whether you want to or not. So this is loose, and it's coming off quite easily. So I'm not damaging roots, I'm just removing old bark. The bark doesn't feel too bad. It's quite hard. Nonetheless, it did have a bit of a whiff to it, a bit of a damp cellar smell. But that could have been the old plug in the centre breaking down. But I'm not worried about getting every old bit of bark out, because the bark isn't too bad. But bearing in mind this is now going to go in a holy clay pot with new large bark, the plan is that it's going to stay in that pot for many years. Well, obviously this bark's probably going to break down first, isn't it? So it's better that it's gone, and then it won't take the rest of the bark with it. So I'm quite pleased with the plant overall. We've got a good root system. There may be some root loss as a consequence of repotting, but it shouldn't be too bad because we're not changing the media dramatically. That's when you tend to get a bit of root loss, or a bit more excessive root loss. Is like if this had been in mainly moss and you take it out of the moss and put it in large chunky bark with lots of air, the roots just don't like the change and will often die as a consequence, and then you're dependent on the new roots growing, and at the moment I don't have any. I suspect that when this plant settles down in its new pot, a lot of these roots are going to branch out. Some of them are papery and are gone. These are dead. Yeah, look where they are. They're on the oldest part of the plant. These are the little seedling pseudobulbs around the back here, and for these roots to still even exist is quite unusual, but they are gone. They're papery, they come apart, they thread themselves off of the tiny little root inside, because that's the root, not this bit, that's the velamen. But these round the back here are all gone, papery, and most of the ones around the front where the new growths are quite fleshy and quite firm. So obviously there's a bit of trimming to do, but not too much. And I want to make sure the base of the plant is clear, because if we have got something living in here at the moment, undetermined, because I still can't see anything. There's nothing moving, nothing wriggling, as far as I can tell. So I'd like to get the base of the plant as clear as possible. Right, that's probably about all I'm going to manage to do. As I say, a few bits dangling down here. They'll probably come off under the tap anyway. Right, next thing is that. Hydrogen peroxide 3%. Now, not everybody does this, and I was laughing to myself when I was at the garden centre the other day, supporting Burnham's and chatting with Arthur and that. Several of the Orchid Society members were there, and one of them had just discovered that, you know, been growing for 50 years and has just discovered that this stuff seems to kill snails and stuff around your root system. And they were having this big conversation as though that was a new thing and a new invention. Some people really do need to get out more. They really do. But that's the trouble with the old school. The internet is not a place where they play. They really don't. And so they don't get to see what other people are doing, and they don't get to hear things like that talked about. And, you know, if somebody had said you use that on your roots a long time ago, I'd have questioned it. I'd have said, well, that stuff burns, but not at 3%. It doesn't do a huge amount of burning at that level, but it still oxidizes and kills stuff. The sort of little stuff that you're going to get on an orchid set of roots. I mean, I know somebody uses that at 3 times that strength and it doesn't do any harm, but I don't see the point in upping the strength of it when that works. It does. It takes out those little bush snails as well. If you get a plague of them, you really are in trouble. They will chomp your root system to pieces under the media where you can't see the little blighters. So this stuff kills off little bugs, little grubbles, things that are in your media that shouldn't be, including the snails. I'm sure it would have a slug if there was a little one in there. Allegedly it knocks out things like pathogens and stuff like that. So it basically gives the base of your plant a clean-up. That's all it's for. And I put, because that's a bottle obviously, I put it in a little mist sprayer. So that gets into all the cracks and crevices. And if you're going to use the hydrogen peroxide, do it when the plant's dry. That's 3%. Yeah? If your plant's soaking wet and you spray that on, it's going to mix with all the wet on the plant. It's no longer going to be 3%, is it? It's going to be diluted, and it may not even work. So use it when your plant's dry. That's one of the reasons I repot my plants when they're dry. They get a good soaking after the repot. Okay, so I'm going to get that cleaned up. I can do that on camera. I don't normally. I normally do it in the sink, but I've got my tray here, so it's not going to do any harm. And it is just literally soak everything. If you've got really good ears, you will hear it fizz. But it will only fizz if it finds something to fizz on. If this plant was squeaky clean with no dust or old media, then it probably wouldn't fizz. Now I can just hear it, but only just. So it's basically aimed at the base of the plant, and you have to spend with a mister like this quite a long time, or you won't get every bit. Right down over all the roots, twist the plant round slightly, have another go round the base, through the cracks of the roots, move your sprayer, move your plant, and use your eyes. Is everything soaking wet yet? If not, you haven't finished spraying. That just reminds me of an old saying. I don't know where I saw it, probably on Facebook somewhere. They say it'll be alright in the end. Well, if it's not alright, it's not the end yet, is it? I like those sort of things. Sort of give them a bit of extra thought. Right, I'm pretty sure that's had a good soak now. Now, this is H2O2. When it's done its job, the H2 becomes H. Sorry, the H2O2, the O2 becomes O. So it is then H2O. It oxidizes. That's where that extra O2, the O, disappears to. Yeah? And you're left with H2O. And you don't have to be a chemistry master to know that H2O is water. So once that's done its job, it's harmless, it's water. Do I trust it? Nope, I still rinse my plant off. I was going to rinse it anyway, but I would still rinse the hydrogen peroxide off anyway. I've got a feeling that those stakes, they weren't necessary. This plant is self-supporting, which a Cattleya should be really. But sometimes on the hybrids that produce the massive flowers, 6 inches across and 2 or 3 on a spike, they'll often bend a cane, a pseudobulb over and make it flop, and then your flowers hang downwards. So sometimes you do have to stake, but a Cattleya should really be self-supporting. Right, so I will get that rinsed off. Hopefully the last of the old bark will come off, and then we'll be back and get it in a pot. I'll be back. Okay, phase 2 is root trimming, and the first thing I noticed running this under the tap is that pseudobulb is broken. Now that's the first one of the getting bigger pseudobulbs following the 2 little seedling pseudobulbs. So as that pseudobulb's broken, I'm going to take all 3 off. So that's the back end, the seedling part of the plant. So that's that bit gone, and with it most of the dead roots that are good. That was part of the plan, and I can now see a couple of little bits of old bark that didn't come out before, which I can now get at. Now I suspect that most of the dead roots are going to be in this area. They should be obvious, yeah? They're papery and they pull away quickly. You need to cut them off as close to the base as possible, and you need to get yourself a pair of scissors that you can aim with and not miss. The idea is to only trim the single root you're trying to trim and not the one behind it. and I would suggest some very, very pointed scissors. These are actually Bonsai pruning shears. They are incredibly sharp, they're stainless steel, last you ages, and they have the beauty of you can actually sharpen them if they do start to get blunt. So you know, the steel is good enough quality to allow you to sharpen them. If you sharpen them too often, you will eventually wear away the hardened edge, and then they don't work so good anymore. But up until that point, you can sharpen them. Obviously you need something to do it with. I've got a stone. I use an old-fashioned stone to sharpen things like scissors and knives, everything like that. I do it the old-fashioned way. So I'm just trying to see where to cut and where not. Just looking for papery roots or damaged roots. Yeah, ones that are broken. So if you cut a root that you're not sure about, cut it quite near the end. Yeah, and see if it, see if there's any life appearing to be in the rest of the root. I mean, this one is really soft there, but there it's not. It's nice and firm. So I'm just going to take the end off of that. Yeah. The end, the growing tip, will stop it growing, but Cattleya roots often branch out. If there's any life left in the root, it'll branch. This is a fiddly job, and it's a little tedious, but it pays to do it. If you put old roots in the pot, they're not going to last long, and eventually they will rot, and then you've got something rotten in your pot, which you can do without. Any form of rot in an orchid pot is liable to set off little chain reactions and start other problems. Can create mould and, you know, things you could just do without in your pot, basically. So always try and get rid of them. There's even some of the newer roots. I did say when I got the plant, some of the roots near the top of the plant had actually died back, probably through lack of hydration. Right, I'm reasonably happy now that there's nothing soggy left. Oh, there's a damaged one there. Take that off. I think that's about it. Everything left feels firm. There's no, oh, there's a papery one. Only the end. Back here it's okay. That one's a bit dodgy at the end as well. I think we're nearly there. But although it seems tedious, it pays to go round every single root. Just near the tip. Is it papery? Is it soggy? Does it give way easily? Or is it nice and firm? If it's nice and firm, leave it. If it's not, take it back a bit. If it's still not very good, take it back a bit more. Velamin's damaged on that bit. That's an old manky one. But that'll do. I may have missed the odd one. It's not the end of the world. And of course, I moved the camera in closer this time, and I haven't checked that any of that was actually on camera. So if it wasn't, well, it's too late now, isn't it? Tough. Hopefully a fair bit of it was on camera. I won't get to know until I get it all on the computer and check it. I'm happy with that. Right, so that's our plant. Cleaned up, tidied up. Now let's get it in a pot. So I'll clear up the mess in a minute. Where did I put my pot? Oh, over here. Right, this is just going in large bark. The Orchiata bark quality control has got a bit iffy lately, so what I always do is just spread it out and see if there's any non-bark bits in there, or bits that I don't like the look of. You sometimes get thin flaky bits in there that just crumble when you touch them, like that one. It won't be bad, there won't be much, but it's worth a quick look. And pieces of wood that are not bark. You do get some of those as well. Right, that'll do. So that can go in the bottom of the pot, and I'm not putting much in there. I have a long dangly root system that I'd rather keep and not break and not damage. This is where it gets a little bit fiddly. These holy clay pots have 3 holes. 4 would be good, but we've got 3. This one has had a little manufacturing flaw, and there is actually a 4th hole. It's a bit low down, but there is a 4th hole. So what I've got to do now is think about where the plant's going to go. Now I want the base of the plant above the media, and I want all of these new growths over there. This is where the next lot of new growths are going to go. So I could do with the plant about halfway across the pot. Now at the moment that's sitting quite nicely at about the right height, which means I don't need any more media in the bottom. In fact, I'm going to take a little bit out, and the next job is to get the wire on. Not after you've got it potted and you can't get at the holes anymore. Do it before. Now this I've just had to go down in the shed and do battle with our 8-legged friends, because the shed is full of the flipping things. But nonetheless, I'd run out up here, so I've got another nice new coil to play with now. And this is between the 2 types of wire I've been using for the last few years, so it's quite firm, quite thick. That would be fine for hooks, you know, to hang mounts, and it'll be fine for this. It's got some strength in it. It also means it's a bit thicker and a little harder to bend. But nonetheless, it's only got to hold a plant in place. Doesn't have to do much, does it? We don't need Arnie Schwarzenegger type strength in our wire to hold a plant in place, do we? So I'm going to push the plant. See, those 2 holes are opposite each other, but that would be across the back of the plant. So that's going to be 1 bit of wire. Yeah? I only fix it at one end, just bend it over the top like that. As I said, it's quite stiff wire, it's not going to move. If you want to be really fussy, bend it round and like that, and pinch it with the pliers if you want to be, you know. But go steady, you don't do too much work with the pliers and crack your pot. Now I need that up out the way. Alright. Now the next bit of wire is probably, if that's going to go there, going to have to go across the plant that way. So this will be a little bit different, and it will need a slightly longer piece as well. So what I'm going to do with this piece is wrap it around those 2 holes. Now that does mean I've got some wire on the outside of the pot. Tough. Plant's more important than the appearance. So I'm going to just bend that round there, so it's gone through 2 holes, and then bring it back together like that. Give it a twist, and then again that piece come right through the centre of the plant and out through that hole. But at the moment I just want it out the way, so we'll just bend it back there. Now we can go back to our plant knowing where our wires are going to go. As I said, is you get your plant all bedded in and all your media are in place, and then find your holes are in the wrong place for your wire. So I've got the piece that's going to go across the back. That's looking good. And the piece across the centre of the plant. That should line up quite good. Right, so now we can get the media in. Try and get as much as you can in between the roots. Don't fill the pot up straight away, otherwise you can't see what the hell you're doing. Just wiggle it in between the roots and turn the pot round and have a go at wiggling some in a different place. Yeah, so that you end up working the media towards the centre of the pot, because if you fill the pot up straight away you can't see the centre of the pot, and the chances are no media will go there. Now that, with a Cattleya, isn't the end of the world, quite honestly. I know what somebody's going to say, why don't you plant that and see if it'll grow? Yeah, well, if you like doing that sort of thing, by all means go ahead. Notice the non-committal answer there. If you like doing it, go ahead. That's all you're going to get. Yeah, so you can see I'm making sure that the centre of the pot has media in. Now if there was a gap there, it wouldn't be the end of the world. A Cattleya won't mind an air gap. It likes a lot of air around its roots. It would be happy like that. But what it won't be is very stable. Yeah? The more roots that grab hold of something, the more stable the plant is. And there are an awful lot of plants that grow in this way, that if they don't feel secure, they're reluctant to produce new roots. Now I don't understand that. I'd have thought it would have made them produce more, because some people say, oh, if it wobbles it will produce a lot more roots to stabilise it. But I've found that it doesn't. I've found that if it's not secure and firm, it's reluctant to kick out a good root system. It will eventually. The more it wobbles, the more likely you are to damage the root tips of those pretty new roots that you're about to hope for and get. Whoop, bit of wood, missed one. So I'm just making sure I've got some around the base. The base of the plant doesn't need to be buried. New roots will push out, they'll go across the top of the pot, down in the media, over the edge, down the side, out through the holes. That's what they'll do. Right, now the important bit, getting it firm. I'm having to hold it because if I let go it'll fall straight out of the pot, but soon it won't. So first of all I'm trying to find my other hole where this wire's got to come out, and that's there. Right, so I'm going to take the wire behind that pseudo bulb. There's a pseudo bulb stump that's been cut off. I'm going to go behind that as well, and behind this nice strong one here. So that's where I'm aiming the wire. That's the back of the plant. Now what I've got to do is get it through the hole. This is always good fun, shooting in the dark. Come on, gotcha. Push that through, and it only just fits. As I say, this is slightly thicker wire than I've been using lately, and I knew I'd have this sort of problem, is, you know, wiggling it through holes. If you get a bit of wire that won't come through, just get a bit of leverage on it. Yeah, just grab it like that and push it with the pliers. It'll soon come. Don't go too mad, you'll crack your pot. Right, so I need that where it's got to go before I pull it tight, because once I pull it tight it's going to be fixed. Right, it's trouble working with slightly thicker wire now. Now what I'm doing now is watching the plant. As I pull, it's pulling the plant down. That's about as hard as I want to be, so we'll give that a twist. The plant's leaning over at an angle at the moment, don't worry about that. We've still got another wire to do, haven't we? So what we can do now is pull that upright and get the other bit across, and then between the two of them they will hold it quite upright. Now this piece of wire is going to pull down on the previous piece of wire, and this time I'm not going to be daft enough to have a great big long bit of wire to pull through. I'll cut it first. Way I've only got to get the end through. So we've now got a cross, effectively. It's across the top of the pot. I can't even see that hole on the inside. Where are you? There you are. Right, so there we go. Right, so get it reasonably tight first, then sit the plant up like that, and then pull. The chances are it will stay where it's put then. There we go. Now the idea is that all the new growths are going to come out here, yeah? And I'll train them using light to go in the direction I want them to go in. And you do that, if you've got single directional light, it's easy. Now I haven't, I've got multi-directional light, but I do have light that comes in stronger from some directions than it does from others, yeah? So I can make sure, like now, my light's coming in from the window. If I place this plant like that, the new growths will come out this way and they'll head towards the light, yeah? So you can train your plant to head off in a certain direction. Right, the plant's quite firm at the base, that's good, we like that, that's what we were after. Now all we've got to do is tidy up the wire ends, because bits like that will catch on your fingers and cut. So make sure all your ends are tucked away down in the pot somewhere where you can't see them. Now there was another one somewhere up here, wasn't there? Over here. Now at the moment I am going to try and use a stake, because these bulbs have still got spikes on. Yeah. Now that they've lost their stakes, they are leaning over a bit, so I am actually going to see if I can get a stake to just hold. Oh, actually that spike's coming off, so that will do the job for that one. That's the old spike. Now the spike's off and I can manoeuvre it round the camera. You can see the marks I'm getting at. They look like something's been burrowing. You know, like a little worm or something's been burrowing its way on the inside of the bud before it opened, and then the marks have become more prominent. So that's that one out the way. That leaves one still in bloom, and it would look nice if it was nice and upright. I put the stakes away. I'll be back. Okay, the other thing to remember that is, once a plant has been staked and it then produces new roots, the stake becomes redundant under normal circumstances. So I'm hoping that these stakes will just poke in there and just do their job. Shouldn't do that with scissors really, but they are incredibly sharp. Shouldn't use them for cutting wood really. So what I'm hoping to do is get away without tying anything. I'm just going to place that stake behind that pseudo bulb to hold it upright. That's all it's for. And even though I've taken the spike off of this one, it's highly likely that this one's going to produce a new growth, and it would be better if this cane pseudo bulb was out of the way so that the new growth can point out towards the edge of the plant. So I'm hoping that just by placing that down there, it'll hold that one in place behind the leaf. Yep. Now I could do that one as well, as we're making the plant tidy. See if I can just get that one to sit upright as well. And then most of the leaves are nice and upright. So I'm working with my thumb, looking at where the position needs to be to push it where I want it. Then I can put the stake in so that the top of the stake is in that position on the pseudo bulb, and it should hold it. There we go. So that is a much tidier plant now, with all the pseudo bulbs that are liable to produce new growths here. New growths are highly likely to come out of here. This one's got a sheath that hasn't bloomed yet. It does feel like there's buds in there, so we should get some more on there. This one didn't bloom, but it is a new growth. This one's in bloom. It's going to shoot out probably there. And then this one round here that's just finished blooming actually has two eyes at the base of that one. If both of them shoot out, that will be brilliant. And there's plenty of room for those new growths in that pot to grow on and bloom, and there's still room for the next set of new growths after those. Now if it's one of those that produces pseudo bulbs on an annual basis up to blooming size blooms and then starts the next one, if that takes roughly a year, there's at least 2 years worth of room in that pot now without even having to think about repotting, and the bark will last that long. Right, so that is now just going to be left to sit. The plant was absolutely drowned in the sink. The roots are fully hydrated. The bark is bone dry. Yeah? So in a day or two, the roots will be bone dry, at which point it'll get absolutely soaked again. And the new Orchiata bark, the large bark, has a little bit of dust in it. Some people panic and decide to wash it before they use it. You can do that if you want, but the first time I water that and give it a good soaking, the dust is just going to wash off and come out through the holes. I'd rather work with dry bark. Some don't, I do. Right, well, let's hope whatever burrowed its way into the buds and did that is not still lurking on the inside of the plant. You have to bear in mind, if this has been imported from a foreign country, I'm not a bug expert, I know an awful lot about our bugs in the UK, but you know, that could have some sort of grub or worm-like creature that's actually inside the plant, and I can't see it. We don't know. Anyway, we've got our nice 3 blooms to look forward to staying there a while, and some more to come and new growths to follow. So that's the progress of that one. Thanks for dropping by. See you next time. That will go in the playlist with the Cattleya series videos. I think there's only a couple in there at the moment, but I'll add this one in. So repotting a Cattleya, good fun. The other one that's part of the Cattleya series will be mounted, but not for a while. So that will be different again when we get there, but not yet. See you next time.